be me. Mormon fig. Start diving deep into the Mormons' history/theology. Have a crisis of faith because it doesn't match up with the very Christian views I'd been taught growing up. Have a seminary teacher that's just an aggressively strange man. Massive autist, but he's honestly one of my favorite people of all time. I'm telling him about the weird shit I've been learning, hoping he'd disprove it, but he's actually delighted. Tells me that he feels like normal seminary classes sanitize the church too much. Compares it to dating, saying that nobody unloads all their baggage on the first date, which is good. But that if you never show that person who and what you really are, you'll never get the chance to be truly loved. Thinks that the church robs itself of the chance to be truly loved by not showing us what it really is. Thinks that the church robs us of the chance to love God by not showing us who He really is. I'm still freaked out. But he seems almost sad at that last part. Says he'll give a lesson on it tomorrow, the official curriculum can wait. Honestly kind of touching. It's not often that you ask a question and a teacher stops what he's doing to focus on you specifically. Get to class the next day and he starts up a story without any heads up to the class. Says that his little sister got married when she was very young, then started going to the hospital a lot. She said she was just clumsy, and he believed her because he's a huge autist and takes everyone at face value. Turns out her husband is beating her, she has enough of it one day and leaves him. In a surprising move for the era, both families wound up supporting her. Her in-laws disowned their son and mourned him as if he died. People start rebuilding their lives, but he's really mad. He was always protective of his little sister, and he'd been really close to the brother-in-law, so the betrayal factor stung. He was still a seminary teacher then, so he taught the lessons, but he said that God wouldn't give his blessing to such an angry man, and stayed away from his lessons. After having one lesson fall particularly flat, he went home and said a prayer. Most of this is abbreviated. The prayer, verbatim, as he told it to us, was, God, I know that I must forgive all me, but I hate this man so much I wish he'd choke to death on his own shit. Grant me the strength to let go. There's no miraculous anger dispral thing, but he mans up enough to get some therapy, and after almost a year of visits, feels at peace with himself. Almost a decade and a half goes by. Gets a call from the ex-husband's in-laws. Apparently, ex-husband had been vomiting a lot and admitted to the hospital. He'd gone unconscious and they weren't sure what was up, but they were calling family in case he died. They asked him as a man of God to come and give their disowned son a blessing. Said that he'd been pretty sure he forgave the man earlier, but that this tested it. He really didn't want to give the blessing, but he took a breath and agreed. Got to the man just before surgery, gave him a blessing of peace, love, and forgiveness, and then the doctors took him to the table. Apparently, the man had gotten some kind of benign tumor in his colon. It hadn't metastasized or anything, but it gotten big enough to block the whole thing up, and if it can't go down, it must go up. Man had literally been vomiting his shit up for days. During the surgery, he vomits and some of it drains back into his lungs. They get it out before he drowns, but the combination of acid and shit gave him a huge lung infection and he later drowned in his own fluids. Class is totally baffled about this, and slightly horrified. Swearing is super taboo in Mormon world. Teacher continues with tears in his eyes. And on that day I felt the true love of God. He'd heard that prayer all those years ago, deep down, but he couldn't fulfill when I was angry enough to be overjoyed with it, because to wish death upon a man in anger is a grave sin, and to relish his death is even graver. But once I had forgiven that man, once his death could be fulfilled without it being damnation to my soul, God gave unto me my wish. And I want you kids to know that this the God that we worship here in this building. He's not the Catholic God of ineffable perfection. He is alien, and strange, and more than a little terrifying, but he is still our God, and we are blessed to love him. Wound up leaving the church because its theology lacked any metaphysical strength, It's basically Gnosticism where you just choose to worship the archon, but that moment stuck with me. Part of me still wonders if he got lucky, if he accidentally cursed the man, or if the strange, physical God of the Mormons saw one of his most truly devoted followers and gave him a boon. You can ask me about the weirdness of Mormon theology if you're curious. They're a weird bunch. So this happened a while ago and has caused a series of strange events ever since. I have been hesitant of ever sharing what has happened because I wanted it to end and not allow it to hold any power over me, but after a recent event I feel it's time to purge this shit from me. I have been a long time lurker and never posted before, so I will try and green text, but forgive me if I fuck it up. First, a little backstory. B. 2004 studied wildlife conservation in jungle environments in Costa Rica, really enjoyed studying birds there. I was and still am skeptical of most paranormal shit, even after some of the shit 4E encountered. This will become apparent later. After finishing my studies I returned back to England and thought about my next move, decided to return to Costa Rica to see more brightly colored birds. Found a house/farm sitting deal in a remote part of central Costa Rica. Thinking this would be perfect for studying a different class of bird, as I had studied wet lowland birds and this was at a much higher elevation. Plan with owner of farm to stay there for 3 months, looking after the property in between my personal sightseeing plans and studies. Told there is a small family that live close by the farm that will oversee my stay and do any major repairs if needed to the farm, and I was to meet them for the keys on arrival. This place was literally in the middle of nowhere. The bus from the nearest town took about 2 hours to arrive at a small shack shop, and from there I had to walk another 2 hours to the farm. The family were very nice, poor local farmer types, with 2 young boys, and they were very warm and welcoming. They all walked me to the farm, which was about half a mile away, and showed me around. My Spanish was not the best and they all had thick farmer accents, but we managed to laugh it off and communicated okay. One thing I thought was strange was they kept insisting I always lock the doors even when in the house. Being in the middle of nowhere it seemed weird, but thought better to be safe than sorry, I guess. First few weeks passed by with no problems. The 2 young boys would come up to the house on odd occasions and play Jenga or ask me about my day. They were good kids and it was good to just sit and chat to someone after a day or so of isolation. One evening the older boy saw my bird book and said the guy that wrote that book lived not far from there, and now he had passed away. His property had become a bird retreat which allowed visitors. Hearing this, I naturally wanted to visit the place and explore. So packing a bag and early one morning I set out to visit the park. It was about 6 miles away. Walking around the park was great, not a person in sight, so a lot of wildlife everywhere. I decided to follow one of the smaller trails, and about 30 minutes in the usual sounds of the jungle seemed to get quieter, not stop, just not as loud. Thinking nothing of it, I carried on to a clearing. In the clearing was a large boulder with carvings all over it. No one had mentioned it and the carvings were all odd. It looked like they had been made years ago. It also looked like it was maintained, as there was no leaf litter on it and the clearing was well maintained. Thinking I had just stumbled on a nice picnic place, I took a few pictures and sat on the rock and ate my lunch. After getting back to the farm I realized just how exhausted I was. Usually so, I was a lot fitter back then, and a day like that should not have affected me like that. Putting it down to the heat of the day, I had a shower and went to bed. That night I had some of the most vivid dreams I have ever had. The dream started with me walking by the farm on one of the trails, only to be greeted by someone dressed as a hay bale. Sorry I don't have this written out ready, I have just decided to share this. The hay bale seemed to be knotted at the top with straw and he babbled to me to follow him. I did so and there was a small campfire. I sat by the fire and he began to dance around, singing to me in English. Every now and then he would stop dancing and it would look like he turned into a normal hay bale, then he would jump up again and carry on swaying and dancing around me as he sung. What he sung about I cannot remember, even at the time I struggled to recall any of it, but I know it was good things, or at least I thought so at the time. The next morning I was so surprised about my dream I drew a picture of him and thought nothing more of it. A few days later the two boys came up to farm for a game of Jenga and a chat. I told them about the rock and showed them the pictures, and both their faces dropped. I asked them what was up. They said I should not have sat on the rock, and definitely should not have eaten on it. It's a sacred rock and should be respected. Thinking it's some local suspicion I apologized to them and that was the end of the story I thought. After a few games of Jenga the younger brother had seen my notebook and asked if he can have a look. I gave it to him and as he opened it fell on the page of the drawing I had made. He screamed and threw the book down. This was the first time he had ever acted in such an odd way. Both were very polite and respectful. I was shocked at the fact he just threw the book down. Asking him what was up he said you have seen him. His older brother picking up the book, looked at the picture and asked when did I see him, he eyes filled with fear. I was so fucking confused, and said oh it was just a dream I had a few nights ago. They both looked at each other, then thanked me for the drinks and left. Not saying much more. By now I was wondering what the fuck was going on. Putting it down to some serious farmer shit. I went to bed and slept, until at some point in the night I heard some strange scraping noises that woke me up. I cannot really describe the sounds. They sounded like branches cracking or flexing, leaves rustling and definitely mud squelching. Thinking about the door being locked put me at ease and although it kept me awake for a while I put it down to a taper or coatis out at night and fell asleep. My dream that night was dark as shit. In my dream I looked out the window only to be greeted with the sight of what I can only describe as an ant, a tall very thin tree-like creature. With long arms and legs, a curved back and a long head that was looking at me as it walked around the farm. I did as all kids do, hid under the covers thinking it would not see me and go away. The next morning I drew the thing down in my book while eating breakfast. I had not long finished my breakfast and the whole family came up the path to the house. This was the first time since being there I had had a visit that early and by the whole family. Thinking it was odd I went out to greet them. They had a serious look on their faces as they said hello, not half as jovial as normal. Wondering what was wrong I asked them is everything okay? The older boy said that they came up to see my drawing. Thinking okay this is really weird I invited them into the house where my book was and my latest drawing on display and they all gasped. The mum just kept saying oh Dios oh Dios. The father looked more closely at the picture without touching the book and then the kids said show them the other picture. So I picked up the book and as I did so they all stepped back as if I was holding something powerful, opened the page on the Haman picture and offered it out for them to see. They stepped back again not wanting to touch the book. The mum by now was furiously crossing herself and the man said it's the shaman, he visited you. He then asked where he took me in my dream. I mentioned we walked along the path just beside the house. He said we need to visit the site and place an offering to him. Thinking okay, just to keep this family happy I will go along with it and see what happens. So walking along the path all of a sudden I see this shit on the ground. It was about the size of a basketball hoop. It was not painted, looked like the clay was actually a different color to the rest of the ground. The dad said you have to place an offering in the ring for the shaman to pick up. Suspicious as fuck I tried to remember if that had always been there or not, but thought better just go with it and went back to the house and got a small bottle of Flor de Cana rum I had recently brought and put it in there. Thinking if the shaman does not pick it up the farmer will and all will be good either way. As we walked back the smiles started to come back to their faces a bit and all seemed okay. Until the dad stopped suddenly looking down on the ground and then looking around keeping his eyes on the ground. Wondering what he had seen I looked down to see holes in the soft clay path and deeper holes in the bush. When he saw that the whole family and I were following his lead he quickly stood up straight and said it's time we went home. Thinking to myself what a fucking morning I said goodbye to them and went back to the house. Later that same day, the dad came back up the path towards the house and seeing him I went out to greet him. He had with him a tool bag. Thinking he was doing some repairs somewhere I asked him if I could help. He said you have to do this, I cannot fix your problem. This is when I kind of realized I'm in the middle of nowhere with a very suspicious family, and got a little freaked. It was the first time I had felt uneasy about everything. With the realization of how vulnerable I was, especially as the father's demeanor was completely different now he was not with his family. He told me the shaman had sent the tree creature to keep an eye on me and he must have broke in somewhere to get on the land and I have to fix the fence. He said he had seen its tracks earlier in the morning and we need to walk around the perimeter of the farm to find the broken fence. Sure enough, after an hour or so we found it, and I had to fix it as he stood and told me how to do it. Half of me was starting to believe this shit, the other half was starting to freak out how serious they were taking it. Either way, I was starting to freak out over it all. The next few weeks went without incident, but my imagination was running wild all the time. I found myself jumping at the slightest sounds and not wanting to walk too far into the jungle. I started to really feel isolated and aware that anything could happen out there. So I decided to pay a visit to the shrine where it all started to try and put it all to rest. Taking some fruit and another small bottle of rum, I went there and placed them together in front of the rock. I don't know if that ever was the right thing to do, but it gave me a small respite of the anxious feeling I had. After a week I had another dream of the tree creature. This time it was scratching on the window, this time trying to get my attention. That fucker didn't get the memo that me and the shaman were back on good terms. So this part of what has been going on over the last 16 years is nearly over. I will find as many related pictures as possible. I don't care if you do not believe this, as I know there are so many stories posted on here that are pure bullshit. The farm and what happened there are just the beginning, and I wish I could go back and change shit as it changed my whole life. Back to green text. Freaked out by this thing, I started to spend more and more time in the local town, going to internet cafes to find other places to go to. Realizing my best option would most probably be in a higher populated area for a while, I decided to go to Bocas del Toro, just across the border in Panama, for some much needed party time and socializing. Then after a week or so I could go back to the farm and feel refreshed. So that's exactly what I did. When I came back and paid a visit to the family, they were happy to see me and it felt good to tell them of my adventures. When I left their house and walked towards the farm, the dread came back like a thick cloud. It seemed like I had not been away and the air seemed hard to breathe. That's when I knew I had to leave there and hopefully all of it behind. Little did I fucking realize. Be biologist. Be doing biologist shit. Buddies are setting camp traps on trees while I'm at camp trying to get a fire going. Fire won't catch. Bill sits next to me. Feels cold, but since everything was cold, never cared about it. This fucking lint won't make a spark. Shitty fuck equipment. Where's Sam with the lighter? Keep complaining for a while. Realize the person next to me isn't talking. Feel a slight chill run down my spine. Slowly look ahead. Can see Sam's and Bill's flashlights in the woods ahead. Who the fuck is sitting next to me? Turn around, all I see is something black. Nope. Wake up next day. Sam and Bill are standing on top of me, white as milk. I'm laying in the middle of the ground a little bit away from camp. They said they heard screaming and when they came I was nowhere to be seen. Had spent the whole night looking for me, shouting, yelling, all they got in response was a deep grunt. Try to get up, pain everywhere. MFW, this is what I looked like when they tore my shirt off. MFW, I had torn both my pectorals, as if trying to push/fight something away, to the point where the muscle tore, and broken 5 ribs and a clavicle. MFW, I'm never doing field trip work again. MFW, every night I nope at the slightest feel of something brushing against me. Where were you when this happened? FT Campbell, Tennessee. This figure was captured on video in the same by YouTube user, James Jones. I named it Horned Man, but it could be just a bunch of trees. Now that you told your story, it made me think of it. Coincidence? Or do we have a real thing here? If it was a bear you wouldn't be here to post that story, just saying. I think serial killers are people with some messed up bits of code in their heads that are a leftover from our more predatory ancestors. I've personally had some experience with a serial killer in my hometown if anyone is interested. It's not your typical /x/ story, but it's still interesting enough. I was going up for a hike in these canyons like I normally do a couple times a month. It's a great spot and good for exercise. There's an old train bridge that goes across the ravine at some point. I say old, but it's been rebuilt recently. Anyhow, I decided to explore underneath the bridge and see what's down there. There's a lot of old abandoned rusty parts from construction, beer bottles, and a camping chair. For some reason, I can hear what I'm pretty sure is people talking/walking up above. At some point I hear what sounds like a cry for help, so I shout back and get a response. I run closer, but then there's a crash and a thud in the trees up ahead of me. I push through the bush as fast as I can, very slowly, and find the body lying there. I'll spare you any gruesome details, but to say the least, the injuries were incompatible with life. I shout up for help, but they either don't answer or can't hear me. I freak out and try to call 911, but this place is pretty remote and cell service is mostly non-existent. At this point I'm not sure whether to move the body with me to the trail or leave it where it is. I decide it's probably a bad idea to mess with a potential crime scene, and plus I don't want to get all bloody or carry a gross, disgusting mangled corpse around. As I head back to the path, I can hear twigs/branches snapping in the distance. It's pretty much impossible to move in thick brush without making any noise. This person was trying, but without a whole lot of success. I immediately got a flash of oh shit when I realized that they might not have friendly intentions. It's hard to explain, but just the way they were moving, it sounded like they were trying to make as little noise as possible. So why would someone be doing that? And right after someone calling for help fell off the bridge. And after I had been screaming for someone to help? Fight or flight response kicked in. I sort of ignored my instinct and went for an intermediate option. I went a ways back into the brush and hid myself while still having a decent vantage point of the area the body had fallen in. The noise coming through the brush got closer and closer, and after about 5 minutes I could see someone walking down the slope towards the body. Their clothing wasn't remarkable. I honestly don't even remember what they were wearing. As for a description, I'm really not the best kind of person for that. I don't remember really specific details much like that, so all I can really say is the guy wasn't very tall, probably around 40-ish years old, and had some sort of hat on. Clothing was muted, no bright colors, but it was still easy to see him. The guy walks up to the body, and looks all around, probably looking for me. When he can't find anything, he goes back to the body, starts examining the wounds. The main thing I remember about his manner is that it was predatory. His walk, posture, it all screamed to me that this man was a predator. The man pulled a small folding spade out of his backpack and proceeded to drag the body further into the forest. I could tell he'd done this before, just on the basis of how confident and assured he seemed to be. I waited for the noise to fade away, then got up and moved as quietly as I could back toward the trail that leads back down to the park entrance where my car is. It took me about 4 hours to get here, so it's not exactly an easy hike back. After a certain point I stopped trying to be quiet and just sort of half run/jog the best I can through the tangle of trees/brush, dead logs and uneven terrain. It takes me a bit, but I get back to the trail, so I take a quick breather before heading back up the slope to the main trail. That's when I hear a sound. It's faint, barely noticeable, but I'm always paranoid for bears/cougars on hikes, so I have a pretty good ear for these things. I sort of realized all at once that this guy was a lot smarter than I'd given him credit for, that he somehow knew I would be watching or saw me and pretended to walk off to bury the body to give me a false sense of security. My first instinct is to just dash off down the trail like a retard, running and screaming for help. I came so close to doing that. If I had, I honestly think I wouldn't be here today to tell the story. The whole thing is a bit of a blur in my mind, but I recall thinking about how he had outsmarted me and basically tricked me into thinking he hadn't seen me while he followed me covertly. Thinking about it, I wonder just how long he'd known I was there. He probably had seen/heard me from the top of the bridge, maybe watched me for a while when he came down. It's hard to say because this is all stuff I'm thinking of in retrospect. But it was clear in the moment that he had outsmarted me because I'd underestimated him, and that he was much more dangerous than I'd first anticipated. He was moving with uncanny silence now. If I hadn't been aware of him I wouldn't have heard him at all. I actually hadn't heard him at all for a few minutes and I was scared that he was way too close for comfort at this point. So rationally, assuming that he couldn't catch/kill me if I ran away was dumb. The smartest way to play it would be to pretend I didn't know he was following me. So I made a show of being upset/scared and trying to make a call on my phone. Of course there is no service, before going back up the trail. As the trail reaches the top of the canyon, it continues along in various straight stretches for quite a ways. Basically, it's hard for someone to sneak up on you because it's a big long straight gravel trail and more of a gravel road than anything else. I actually see 4x4 vehicles driving on it every now and then. I have a really good feeling he's behind me, but I'm too afraid to turn and look behind me because then I think he'll know I know he's following me. But at the same time, maybe not looking is suspicious. But I pretty much decide to keep walking ahead, hurried pace but not too fast even though my heart is pounding like a jackhammer. After a while walking, I take out my phone and pretend to try and make another call on it, but I actually take a quick sneak at the reverse cameras/selfie thing on the camera app and I'm able to confirm that he is in fact on the trail, following behind me. I'm a few minutes away from full-blown panic and still trying to stay as normal as possible while this killer is stalking behind me. Does he have a gun? If he has a gun he could be shooting me at any moment. It could just be lights out, my life shut off without me even having the courtesy of hearing the bullet before it disconnects my brain. Should I just charge him? Try to ambush/surprise him? Is he waiting for something? When is he going to make his move? What the fuck should I be doing? That's pretty much the shit that was going through my head. I had no idea what I was going to do. Then I had the thought that he knew that I knew he was following me. What if I'd underestimated him again? What was he planning? I'm not sure if it was adrenaline or fear that caused the response, but something just sort of clicked inside me. I realized that this guy was a predator, and that he was familiar with the chase. He delighted in the fear of his victims. He could probably read the fact that I knew he was following based on my body language. He could probably tell I was terrified out of my mind. And he was probably getting off on it. So I did the one thing he would never have expected. I stopped, turned around and started walking towards him. I don't know where I got the confidence from, but it came out of nowhere. All of a sudden I wasn't scared, I was angry. I was furious. I was the opposite of scared. He was obviously a bit confused, as he stopped walking to stare as I came toward him. As I came further, I pulled the 6-inch buck knife I keep on me for bears out, tossed it off to the side like it was worthless as I kept walking toward him. I'm not sure why I did that, even now. I was basically acting on pure, primal instinct at that point. The memories I have of it are almost in third person, like I'm watching someone else. In any case, whatever the reason, I tossed my knife away, screamed at the top of my lungs while pounding my chest and charged him at full speed. I was around 20 feet from him when he pulled what I think was a gun out of his waistband. I'm honestly not sure because I never got a good look at it. If it was a gun, maybe the safety was on, it jammed, or it was a fake. God knows. All I remember from that point is slamming into him, wrapping my arms around him in a bear hug. I had about 4 to 5 inches on him height-wise and probably around 50 pounds in weight. I don't remember how long the struggle lasted, but it ended when I chucked him off the side of the path into the ravine. Which was at this point of the trail, an extremely steep slope that was basically 800 feet nearly straight down to the riverbed. You've probably heard of the adrenaline giving you a shitton of strength thing, and I'm absolutely certain it's true because I literally picked him over my shoulder and tossed him a good 10 feet straight out from the path before he began to fall. I saw the whole thing in slow motion as I did it. The panic and fear in his eyes, the struggle, the panic, the flailing as he began to fall. Weirdly enough, I had a boner afterwards. Are stress/rage boners a thing? Who fucking knows? Anyway, I took a while to collect myself and then I just kept walking back to my car. And yes, I still hike there to this day. Because fuck letting that dickhead take my favorite hiking spot from me. Anyone else have brief experiences? Like sort of meeting a strange person on the street and passing them by? 'Cause I've had a few. Told them here in the past before. First one that comes to mind. On my laptop, laying in front of it covered in a blanket with a pillow on my chin. Just browsing to try and pass the time before I pass out. Suddenly smell a very clear scent of wood burning, not like the candles my family usually burns, like a breeze coming over a campfire clear. Worried something is on fire that shouldn't be, flop over my side and look into the darkness around me. A couch is in front of me, behind it is the staircase. See a big, clear shadow figure rush at Mach fuck down the stairs. Vanishes at the bottom with the wood burning smell. Stare in the darkness a while, roll back over on my stomach and go back to browsing. Second story that comes to mind. In the same room as the above story, again browsing in the same way as then. Get a feeling someone is looking at me. I am paranoid about people peeking over my shoulders, so I know this feeling. Feel it by the stairs. Figure it's one, the cat or little shit dog. Grab the crap wrist flashlight I have by me and shine it up at the stairs to ease my mind. Clear orange-red eyes are staring at me, larger than either of the lil critters I was expecting, like human eyes with eyes hind. In the edge of the light I can make out the outline of what looks like a girl laying on her stomach watching me. With that medium sort of bowl cut haircut girls used to get sometimes. Stare for a good 5 seconds, eyes locked with the thing. Turn the light off, roll over and ignore the feeling until it goes away. Third story that comes to mind. Going to bathroom late at night. Closest bathroom is past a short hallway under those stairs. Flick lights on, close door and catch myself in the door frame for no reason. Smiling, looking fine reflection, what the fuck is that? See what looks like a pale face and hand peeking and looking at me down the hall. Anus loosens in fear as the door closes behind me in the moment I spot that damn thing. Stand there and decide to do my business, quickly scurrying back out of the hallway when I'm done. Tell myself it's the ducks my dad had mounted on the wall opposite of the hall, and I just saw it wrong. Look at them in the morning. They're too far away to be seen in the dark, nowhere near as white and pale as the thing I saw. Fuck. The way I saw it, the thing had to either crawl on the wall or hang by the railing to peek and turn its head into the hall like I saw. Don't look in the mirror for a few days after that, close the door as quick as I can. Fourth experience that comes to mind. Walking down the stairs one night, no lights on as I have good night vision due to being a night owl. Start to reach the halfway point of the stairs. Then, in the flash of a passing car's headlights driving past the house coming through the door's little window, I see a clear figure of shadow. A little girl in a dress, leaning on the railing. With that medium bowl haircut. Jump back up a step, recoiling. Shadow girl is gone. Heart starts beating again. Quickly walk the rest of the way down the stairs. Fifth story. At high school. Waiting from bro to pick me up. It's raining, I don't mind, bored as shit and away from everyone else as I'm an antisocial autist. Begin to wander between these portable classrooms, kind of like trailers. Why? My legs are getting restless and I have nothing else to do. Walk into the alleyway between trailer classes, just enjoying the rain. A very clear, feminine, and British accented voice rings in my ear, like someone leaning in to talk to it. In a teasing tone it says, "I can see you there, you know." Glance around, see no girl. Nor anyone else. Closest person is around 20 or so feet, out of the alleyway. Retreat from the alley as quick as my chubby legs can go. Had some weird dreams at that school too, while I napped through lunch. Sixth story. Now, to start this one off. I used to be scared of the dark. I was an imaginative kid, so I saw a lot of things in the dark that wasn't there. Bro shared a room with me, so I felt safe and hid under my covers if I saw anything. Just random monsters, kid stuff. Only saw one more than once. A sort of goblin thing, an old withered almost mummified man, with scars, and a huge ass smile. Crawling on the walls like a spider, watching me. Scared the shit out of me. Forget it, assume it was just another nightly terror I dreamt up and leave it at that. Until me and my bro start talking about supernatural stuff one day. He tells me, when we were kids he heard heavy, raspy breathing one night. I had asthma as a kid, so he got worried and looked over at me. And from this corkboard above my bed, a goblin-like head emerged, withered and dried, covered in scars. Aged and with a big smile. Breathing heavily, it looked down at me as I slept. Bro, in all of his love for me, did exactly what I would do, and rolled over. I never told anyone about the crawling man, never thought about it for years. And bro just gave me a near exact description of the fuck. Shit bricks and tell him, he's surprised about it too. I've also seen a UFO with most of my family one time, and my saw something in the woods me and my pops thinks was a Bigfoot. Things always go missing in my childhood home, and my bro and mother used to hear me and my younger sisters crying out for help while we were at school. Things have quieted down in recent years. Still don't like looking up at the stairs when I'm around that house at night though. Shared this before. Brother's an archaeologist. We were drinking a bit during Christmas once and he shared this story. For what it's worth, my brother doesn't entertain the paranormal whatsoever. Brother's in Greece. He and a group of archaeologists are on a dig. But there turns out to be a lot of bureaucratic red tape surrounding the excavation site. The dig is postponed indefinitely. So now brother and a bunch of archaeologists are sitting around in the Mediterranean waiting on an official go-ahead to start their work. Brother decides to go exploring around the excavation site. Beautiful weather and scenery. Brother comes upon a grove near the main site. He finds a man sitting on a large stone that's protruding out of the ground. The man is holding what looks like a large, pointed stone, well over a foot in length. Dad thinks, that looks like a Stone Age artifact. Nobody else is supposed to be in the area. So brother figures it's a local who's been illegally digging. Brother yells out, "Hey!" The man turns and looks at him for a long moment. He's an old man with a long beard. He's wearing a brown outfit made of tattered cloth. After a moment the man simply disappears. Brother freaks the fuck out. But still he goes over to inspect the large stone the man was sitting on. He feels an ice-cold chill in the air. But he's more interested in the protruding stone. It looks unusual. He sees other stones nearby, kind of arranged in a circle. He goes back to the others and asks the main archaeologist, "Hey, what's that stone formation out in the grove?" The guy's already familiar with it. He says, "It's nothing, but hey, nobody's ever dug there and it's not off limits to us, so let's just check it out." They dig. It turns out to be a grave. They find a man's remains. He's buried with an assortment of beautiful relics. One of which is a stone dagger. Looks exactly like the stone item the strange man was holding before he disappeared. Got too much stuff to list without completely hijacking the thread, so I'll limit myself to the one time I could confirm it 100%. Sleeping in my flat, on a large folding bed. About 1.5 m from the closest other furniture, smooth wooden wall behind me. See a recurring character in my dream. Basically, a young, very slender woman whose body is always cold. Often appears in my dreams, so I came to get along with her quite well. Hug her. Notice that her body feels wrong, hot, too soft, too thick on some parts. Wake up. See golden eyes right above my head. Creature sees my eyes opening and recoils. See a woman with dark hair and antlers on her head sitting on top of me. Panic and punch her in the face, causing her to fall off the bed. Recoil from the punch throws my body up, waking me for real this time. Draw knife from under the mattress, search the room. Nothing. Must have been a dream. Notice I'm bleeding from between the knuckles on my hand. Wound looks like it was caused by a pointy object, like a canine tooth. I had a wound in the same spot from hook punching somebody once before. Nothing around the bed could have caused that wound. Notice that carpet is ruffled where I thought the creature fell. That might have been caused by me during the search though. Always bury your dead, unless you want them to come back and haunt you. And just in case, give them their last rites and if necessary a baptism. If you can't, set the fucking thing on fire. And remember, there's always worse shit in the woods and in the waters. Especially water, since the old Slav underworld was underwater. Which is why you have a ton of scary shit come out from water, and almost all of it wants to murder your ass. Vestica, vestis plural, translates as witches. Nobody bothered to give them a proper, unique, name because everyone usually stays the fuck away from those things. Think Baba Yaga, that's what those things are. All of them have their own small houses in the middle of nowhere. All of them live alone. All of them loathe people coming near them. And all of them are ancient, and still somehow in better shape than you. They never run out of wood and supplies needed for survival, even though you've never seen them buying shit or doing farm work. People used to leave them gifts to appease them, sometimes they'll even offer advice or if they're in good mood heal the sick. Probably the scariest part is that apparently anyone who reaches an old age and lives through some serious shit can become one of them. And if you live in block country, like I do, they can do magic. So they don't even have to be near you to fuck your shit up, all they need is a piece of string or a hair, and the moment they tie a knot into it, you're fucking dead. The place I grew up in actually had a story about the local witch. If you guys are interested I could story time. Okay, first some info about the place. The region is old. Ancient. One of the oldest Mesolithic settlements in Europe was found there, in a gorge made by the Danube River. That place was swept under the waves. Then the Romans came, declared the place the edge of their empire, built a huge bridge and a fortress there to defend against invaders. The bridge was also swept under the waves. Then the Turks came, and built a fortress there. Part of the fortress was swept away, and their graveyard ended up underwater. When the Second World War ended, the commies found several struggling villages in the gorge and decided to flood them in order to build a nearby dam. The waters are so treacherous that ship captains fucking dreaded going through the gorge if they didn't have a local with them. And because of how ridiculous the weather is, whenever there's rain or snow there are landslides and floods everywhere. A year or two ago, a massive landslide wrecked an entire town and laid bare a graveyard we didn't even know was there. And people report, almost every year, strange shit that the flood dug out, from dead cows to monuments to who the fuck knows what. They had to stop a hydroplant turbine one time because dead shit was clogging it. I went in a woods with a couple of friends after a huge landslide, and we saw some weird sticks sticking out of the mud. We later realized those were the tops of the trees, buried under mud. You see the pattern. And of course, there are whirlpool everywhere. These tie with the story. I should really get to it, because according to the local legends, the white whirlpools are actually water devils. Because they were everywhere, the locals told their kids to stay away from the water, or at least not go deep. Each year there are a couple of drowned kids, usually drunk tourists who decide to go swimming in the night, but occasionally you end up with a drowned fisherman. Anyway, onto the rural legend. The story says that after World War II, the whole region was in absolute ruins. It was the place where the Russians crossed the border, so of course there was carnage everywhere. The local families fled for their lives ages ago, and were now coming back to what little remained of their homes. One of those families returns, and finds that their grandma was still there, alive and kicking. And fucking angry. She told them to start working on the land, because she was tired from burying the dead with her own two hands. The family obliges, because something's clearly changed with grandma since they last saw her. For starters, she isn't dead. Time passes, Granny refuses to die. The family starts thinking about what to do in the future, and the granny suggests/orders that they'll open a butcher shop. Where are we going to get the meat? They ask. She tells them not to worry about that, and comes back later that day with a slaughtered cow. And so on and on. Meanwhile, stories start popping up about whirlpools popping up out of nowhere, sudden drownings and monster sightings in the water. And each time someone notices something missing, the grandma would come up next day with fresh meat. So, her grandson and his best friend, kids at the time, decide to investigate these rumors. They follow grandma to the river, where she strips naked and starts chanting. Then the stench hits them, rotten, wet. And out of the waters, a humanoid figure emerges. A frog-like head on top of a human body. Pale green skin, huge bulbous eyes, rows upon rows of teeth. The Vlachs call it the water devil. The South Slavs call it vodnik. You've probably heard it being called vodianoi. Grandma demands more meat, and the creature tells her, in a gurgle, how the deal is off. She was followed, and it wants those who followed her. The two kids start running away, with grandma chasing after them. Her skin now looks like tree bark, her eyes huge and bloodshot. Her limbs are twice the size they were before, she's screaming at them in an ungodly tongue. The works. She grabs her grandson, and realizes who spied on her. Apparently family ties are still important to these hags, and she lets him go. The kid returns home, fucking terrified, and his grandma is sitting there, waiting for him. The family business is over because of him, she can no longer provide food for them. They have to move to the next town and start over, because now everything in the water is after them. And because grandma told them to get the fuck away, they can't say no. So far, the family with the witch in them is still around. They still run a butcher shop. And they're terrified of stepping near the waters, because they have an impressive death by drowning ratio. And that's the story about the local hag thing. Those things are apparently horrifying. The father of a friend snapped during the war in the 90s. He came back, brought guns with him, including fucking grenades, and was generally the scariest motherfucker around. You always had this feeling of him being one word away from getting his guns and just going after you. His family was terrified of him. He'd storm into their apartment, they lived separated, since the guy was a notorious drunk well before he was drafted, in his military fatigues, start waving his gun around, and demanded answers like who are you fucking, where are my kids, are they eating well and stuff like that. You get the idea. The guy was also convinced that he saw paranormal shit out there during the war. Maybe it's stress, maybe shell shock, maybe alcoholism, who the fuck knows. He swore he saw something take the corpses of the fallen soldiers into the water. He opened fire at them, and that only made them angrier. The other solders in his squad apparently saw them too. They heard them screaming at them in the night. Sometimes they'd imitate other people, yelling for help or just lament loudly. Anyway, the guy died a couple of years ago. A flood hit, again, and the guy was caught outside of the city when the water reached him. Apparently he had a panic attack, started screaming about seeing them in the water, how they came back for him. He ran out of the car with a heavy chain. Apparently he and his friends were out salvaging shit from the nearby ditches, and tied himself to a tree. The people who were with him tried to help him, but the water was too strong. Some guy even ended up with a broken foot because something, probably a rock that the water was carrying, hit him in the leg and almost crushed it. They left him there, screaming at the water and tied up with chains. They came later for him. The guy was gone. All that remained was a bloody chain, and a huge pile of rocks that the water dragged along. They still haven't found his body. Somewhere in north/central Texas. Walking through some overgrown creek bed with friends. Have AR and 5 chem lights with me because of local rabid dog scares. Come across old concrete building in middle of fucking creek bed. Can feel 9/level evil coming off this place. Investigate. 2-story, 1 large room, balcony across center of room, big fucking hole in middle. Drop chem light down hole and human-sized movement about 50 feet down, though oddly shaped and hunched over. Loud scream from hole. Fire 2 rounds into hole and nope the fuck home. Old Dutch family story, literally goes back to the middle in the 19th century. My ancestors came from a small village. One of the farmers had this weird boy. The boy would walk weird, flap his hands, kill small animals, yell loudly, sometimes touch girls' breasts. After getting a few beatings and warnings, the boy was kept on his father's farm, not even being allowed to enter the church. One day the boy enters the church, sobbing and confused, asking to talk to the priest. The priest and several of the local men approach the boy because he is not welcome in the church. He begs the priest to allow him to stay in the church. The priest asks him why. The boy, crying and being hysterical, says he accidentally summoned the devil and that the devil will drown him. The men of the village are hesitant and want to put the boy in a mental asylum outside the city. The boy agrees, but begs them to allow him to sleep in the church this night, because the devil will try and drown him. The priest agrees and a carpenter goes to the city to get someone from the asylum. The boy calms down, gets a small bed, and the priest promises he will be sleeping nearby and that he can call him any time he wants to. 3 times the boy wakes up the priest, because he sees the devil waiting outside the church. 3 times the priest and the boy pray together and read from the Bible. At the end of the evening it starts to rain and small puddles form. It is almost daybreak, the priest is up already to check on the boy. The boy looks outside and says, "I did it, I won from the devil." Happy and confident the boy says he is going to look as the sun rises. The priest goes inside to get something to eat for himself and the boy. When he walks outside to give the boy some bread and cheese, he finds his death body drowned in one of the puddles that formed last night. I've never visited this board, so excuse any errors I make regarding board culture. Here is a story that is currently happening to me. I'll give a little background and then go green text. My buddy David has 800 acres near Galena, Alaska. We're up here building onto his house and fishing the nearby rivers on our off days. We're about 15 miles back on a gravel road that goes further onto BLM. There are a few logging trucks a day on the main road, but basically no traffic after the sun sets. The first day we got here together in my Tacoma 4x4. We unscrewed the plywood off the windows, brought our bags onto the porch. Got his generator started up and unlocked his various outbuildings. The air was stale and a little rank, like a dead cat. Opened side door to kitchen. Opened the back door of the cabin and the windows that you could open. Didn't go upstairs, just let the place air out. Sat down on the porch to rest and quench our thirst. It's only been in the low 60s but the plywood was heavy. We sat there and planned our remodel, generally shot the shit, happy to be here. He fiddled with his bait and tackle and I admired the view from the front porch. Now I'm not really a ghost or spirit believer. But I saw something last weekend. It's real quiet and there was a lull in our conversation. Then out of the corner on my eye I saw somebody walk out the open kitchen door. I rotated in my seat to see who was there. I barely saw the guy turn the corner towards the back of the house towards the forest. What the fuck? David yells. Did you see that motherfucker? I did, dude. Who the fuck is that? David runs out to his truck where he has a Mossberg 590A. It's buried deep in our knock boxes and we had a bunch of shit to unload to get to it. We just throw shit out of the truck till we get the box open. We decide to search the rest of the house first, scattergun in hand. We go upstairs. We look into the 2 bedrooms, under beds, and everything. Nothing, no sign of squatters, animals, nothing. We both affirm we saw a little man with no shirt walk out of the kitchen door to our left from the main porch. We then go towards the back forest. The house and the pad they built it on has a thick gravel base right up to the forest. The forest floor is a thick mat of leaves, needles and duff and hard to track in. We looked all around and found no tracks. With the sun going down and all of our shit exposed, we decided going further into the forest was a bad idea. We both go back inside and close all of the windows. Unpack our tools. Set up our gear in the lower 2 bedrooms. We regroup in the kitchen and start guessing who that was. Was it a squatter that was living elsewhere on the land and heard us opening up the plywood? Thief? Animal? Either way, we're 2 badass carpenters with guns and not afraid to throw down with some little fucktard. We both go to bed. The next day we start setting up out tools and saws under tarps. We had the shotgun on a sawhorse nearby. Unloaded table saws and miter saws, setting up sawhorses. Getting all the blades adjusted and going through the lumber he has on site. We brought cement to pour a post and pier foundation for his addition. We unloaded that and decided to go fish in a river about 300 yards downhill from us. He caught 2 trout right off that bat and I caught one about 20 minutes in. It slowed down after that and we hiked further upstream. That's where we heard rustling across the stream from us. It could have been any number of animals, so we stood sharp. We fished there for about 2 more hours and Dave started gutting the fish we had. We both head up to the house to wash up and fry some fish. After the last few bites of fish go down, Dave stands up at the table. He says he left his Benchmade down there where he was gutting the trout. He grabs a flashlight and heads down there. He said he looked for the rock with the fish guts on them. Said his knife was there, but the fish guts were gone. He half jogged back to hide, being scared. Later that night, right after we both go to our bedrooms and shut off the lights. In the total silence I hear footsteps on the 2nd story. I think maybe an animal or squirrel snuck up there. Try to ignore it. It gets more frequent, with the steps going away from me towards the staircase. Dave calls out loudly, "Is that you up there?" "No," I answer, now to my bedroom door. We both open our doors at the same time and step into the main room. We bumped off of each other in the dark and both looked at the upper staircase. I saw what looked like a small boy. But his face was almost featureless and his eyes seemed pitch black in the low light. "Dave, who the fuck are you?" The figure slowly steps to the railing like he was going to answer us. Instead he let out an incredibly loud ear-ripping screech. Like what you imagine a T-Rex would sound. It was so loud I covered my ears and stumbled to the floor in the dark. It was so loud it disoriented me. From the ground I look up at the 2nd floor just in time to see it run back into the bedroom. Dave ran past me with his Mossberg in hand. Dave ran to the top of the stairs and turned the hall light on. He then ran straight into the bedroom and out of my sight. Boom. 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 At this point I am beyond scared and almost physically shutting down. Like heat stroke or hypothermia. I knew that those gunshots meant that Dave may have just killed somebody. Dave reappears at the top of the staircase. He jumped out of the window and ran into the forest. He's like a deformed midget, his back was all fucked up and he was on his hands and knees. What? Did you hit him? If his legs are fucked up, how did he run away? I don't know, but he jumped out and ran into the fir trees. We both went out the back door and turned on the exterior lights. There was no blood on the gravel, the smell of burnt powder was still in the wind. Was he up there all day? Dave, he must have been, he probably snuck up there while we were working. So why would he go up there? Anything of value? Dave, fucking nothing, old blankets and pillows. Dave, do you have your game cam? Dave, yes, it's in the truck. He goes out to his truck, while I watch from the front door. Again the enormous sound shatters the night. I imagined that the sonic crowd control weapons you hear about would feel like this. I instinctually covered my ears and let go a little pee into my boxers. Dave had dropped his gun and keys out of shock. He jumped into the Tacoma and locked the door. Keys and shotgun on the ground outside of his truck. I close the front door and stare at Dave through the window. He can see behind the house and I can't. His mouth is agape. Figure fuck this. Run out towards truck, grab gun, grab keys and beat on window for Dave to open up. He turns to me as white as a ghost and opens the door. Frankly, I'm too afraid to look up towards the back of the house and just rush back to the door with Dave in my arms. I slam the front door and start locking all doors and windows. Dave is pretty much in shock. What did you see, nigger? What did you see? Dave swallows deeply and says it was a stretched out dead guy that roared at us. He then rolls over and barfs on his floor. I am really starting to panic and experience tunnel vision. I never knew what that meant until that moment. I give Dave a rag and we sit on the couches. Who the fuck was it, Dave? A dead guy. Dave, it looked dead and ashy, but it made that noise, and then made a scary face when it saw me. Its face moved into an evil shape. Let's leave, dude. Dave, I can't leave all my tools here. Let's drive into town and get a motel then. Dave, okay. We grabbed out phones and wallets and the Mossberg. Dave insisted on setting up the game cam before we left. He wanted it on the front door, but I said let's put it out back on a tree to see if this thing comes back. We put up the cam on a tree directly behind his house under full gun coverage. We then jump into the Tacoma and peel away from the house. We drove back into town, but everything is booked, so we sleep in the truck. In the morning after breakfast, we drive back to his place. We pack up all of our tools as quickly as we can. We screw the plywood back up. Then, with the engine already running, I go retrieve the game cam. I didn't get to download them until today when I got back home. I'm pretty sure what we saw was that little man in the center and a little left of the tree. I went to a private Christian school from preschool up until 8th grade, and the students there had a sort of microculture of urban legends related to the school, which would be passed down by way of older students trying to spook the newfigs. Each class added its own contributions to the oral history, and their own marks on the physical environment, whether in the form of lore and hieroglyphs etched into corners or on the bathroom walls, or forts constructed in the woods by the massive playground, which would be inherited and maintained by the next generation. A guy in the class above me who was moving away hid $100 somewhere in the school and left behind a series of clues to find it. The school itself was very old and very large, the main building having served as a school of some kind or another for going on 100 years, per an investigation by some kids from the yearbook club one time, although its early history was a little hazy. The library had yearbooks from some of the previous schools that had been there, and some of the older teachers knew about the before times, but for the most part we were just impressionable LARPing kids letting our imaginations run wild in the perfect setting for spook to occur. For some examples, there were stories about pedophiles living in nearby houses, homeless people squatting in the unused areas, bloodstains in the boys' locker room, kids trapped in the ventilation system, secret passageways, Satanist infiltration of all kinds, and stuff like that. As for more tangible things, there were large storm drains outside that could easily be climbed into, and gotten stuck in, which I seem to remember happening at least once, a rock on the playground that everyone was weirdly drawn to and would fight over for no apparent reason, a room behind a bookshelf in the library that one friend and I remembered, all of our classmates had forgotten, and which we got in trouble for trying to get into, a huge area of tunnels and mostly unused storage rooms. Under the main building, we knew of at least entrance point from the gym, and would sometimes slip down there during gym class when no one was looking. Sometimes lads from different classes would pick a time and place to meet up and hang out for a few minutes. You'd say you needed to go to the restroom during class and go the meeting spot instead. Since you couldn't have half of every class going to the restroom at once without teachers knowing you were full of shit, being the guy from your class to know the right place and time was how you knew you were cool. The school was also extremely creepy at night, big, old, cold, and cast with some inexplicable reddish glow through the windows, like something out of a movie. Anyway, trading Yu-Gi-Oh cards in secret underground rooms and sitting in a classroom not a minute more modern than 1920, debating the proper procedure to open up the portal on the far end of the boys' bathroom was a pretty cozy school experience. As for the storm drains, there really wasn't much to explore. They were just interesting because of how easy they were to get stuck in. I had an intense phobia of being pushed into one, so I always gave them wide berth. As for the tunnels, maybe. I think we mostly explored them, but there was one pathway I never had a chance to go down. We were usually on a time crunch to get back before we were missed. There were rooms connected to the tunnels. Most of them were empty and gave no indication of what they were ever used for. The procedure for those was to keep the doors open at all times, and leave at least one guy outside to get help if necessary, as lore dictated they were difficult to open from the inside and tight enough that a group of guys would start running low on oxygen fairly quickly. Nobody knew how true that was, but nobody really wanted to test it either. I don't know for sure who found it, or if it was found at all. Obviously, the first guy to figure out each clue will try to throw others off the trail, and between the deliberate destruction of clues, false clues, LARPing kids claiming to have already found the money, and so on, the waters got muddy fast. I assume one of the older guys just got the drop on everyone else, found it without telling anyone, and then sat around laughing at everyone running around talking about how it was in X classroom or under Y bleachers. On the other hand, while he was a pretty upstanding guy, I wouldn't necessarily put it past the guy who hid the money in the first place to have been screwing with us, as in, maybe there was no money and the whole thing was just an epic going away prank. It's impossible to know now, without tracking a bunch of people down, but like Carlos Castaneda said, the world needs a bit of magic and mystery. So I read some creepy stories from people serving in the army in their respective countries yesterday, and decided to share my story. Short info, I served in the Norwegian army. In Norway we have a mandatory year of service if our psychological and physical health is good. I went as north as Norway goes, hoping to get to guard the Norwegian-Russian border as a border Jaeger. This is one of the more prioritized sections of the Norwegian army. So there is also a selection of who gets to go to the border doing operative missions. Long story short, after 6 months I was put in a group of 4 men, regular patrol with medic, patrol leader, next in command and a comm man. We left the big garrison, and went to smaller stations with different areas of responsibility along the border. 19 YRS. Me and my crew, 4 PPL, off to a new mission. We are specialized in observation, not being seen behind enemy lines. Mike drives us out about 3 km where the road ends. Put on our gear, start walking along a small gravel road which leads to the observation tower. Winter is coming.jpg. It's getting colder, and darker each day, no problem though, as we have trained in the worst weather this part of our country has to offer. 5 hours later we reach the destination. 25-meter high tower with a small cabin at the bottom. We'll stay here for the next 22 days, no phones. We've been here before, It's our usual base while out on missions. Our job is basically just to watch over the Norwegian, Russian border 24/7 and walk patrols along the border line. On arrival we talk some shit with the guys who guarded the base before we came, information about what they had experienced, just some administration BS. Then they leave. One of the guys who left talked about seeing some big dark figure moving through the woods at one of his shifts. Probably a moose or a bear, no worries. Now, the base described in the green text is located very remote. There is no buildings nor people for several kilometers around. After carrying all our gear, weapons, and food inside the cabin, we start cleaning our gear as it's full of snow. The medic is up in the tower, as it needs to be at least one person up there at all times, as I said, 24/7. Me and my patrol leader, Olav, started preparing dinner while our comm guy, Peter, was doing an inspection of the base, making sure the patrol who left upon our arrival had cleaned everything properly. Now, the dark is coming, and without any light sources other than a red LED lamp on top of the tower, it's dark outside our base. The temperature outside is rapidly falling to about -24°C. I go to our storage room, get a bag of firewood and light up the fireplace. After dinner is done, me, Peter and Olav sit down in the living room, turn on the television, and start to eat potatoes, some greens, and elk meat I believe it was. After about 20 minutes, Roy, the medic, calls down. We have a phone which connects the one floor to the tower, so that we can communicate more efficiently. I pick up the phone, and he informs me about having seen something lurking through the woods about 1 km out from our position, on the Russian side of the border. The radar also picked up movement in that direction. I tell him to just keep his eyes up, and use the thermal binoculars if he feels the need to. Roy didn't sound scared or anything, just wanted to inform us about it, in case we needed to get up there and assist him, or get out and find the suspect potentially crossing the border illegally. I haven't pre-typed this shit out, so sorry if it's taking some time. Anyway, the time is around 8:30 p.m., and my shift starts at 9:00 p.m. Go take a shower, make myself a mug of coffee, and watch TV for 5 more minutes before going up to the tower room. After 1 million steps I'm there, open the hatch and climb the last ladder into the up room. Roy is doing good, nothing to report except that shit he saw in the woods, which he already informed about earlier. Roy says good watch and leaves, a fucking gay tradition, but it's nice. Sit down, pour myself a cup of coffee and relax. So we have a lot of equipment in the tower, much of it is actually confidential so I can't share too much about it. But we have a computer, with the internet only for mails and a chatting program which is connected to other bases along the border. I start talking to a friend of mine on the chatting program. We talk about your regular run-of-the-mill shit, nothing special just to make time go by. Just to make it clear, it's pitch black outside, and the only light is the stars, the moon, and the aurora borealis, which is fucking beautiful BTW. Sitting there, cursing to myself, why the fuck do we need to sit here all night, you don't even see shit when it's nighttime. 1 hour goes by, then 2, only 1 hour left now and Pete will take over. Boom, lights out. WTF.jpg. I know I said we don't have any light sources outside, but inside we do, not that we keep them on at night, but all the electronical devices inside the tower went black. Never experienced a power surge out here ever, and as far as I know, no one else did either. Panicking, knowing I can't leave the fucking tower. And can't get a hold of the guys downstairs as the phone is dead as well. Contemplating what to do for maybe 5 minutes, and the power turns on again. Thank you Jesus. Gif. So this is about the time where our troubles began. Peter comes up, talks some smack, explain the power surge shit to him. Hope it doesn't happen to me, haha, what will I do if the computers are down? Good watch, go downstairs. Reach the living room, No one there as the time is now 12:10 am, Roy and Olav probably went to bed. Go to the fridge, get myself some ham and cheese and make a late night snack before hitting the bunk beds. Watch some more TV, only source of entertainment up there. Clean my plate of, and head to our bedroom. The bedroom is small, with 4 beads, one for each patrol member. There is also a phone inside the bedroom, which works as an alarm clock of sorts. If the guy who has to take over the shift doesn't wake up, the guy in the tower can call down and wake up him or anyone who can then wake him up. The phone can also be used to call for assistance if needed. I take off my clothes, set my alarm on my watch, and close my eyes listening to my 2 patrol members snoring like a woodwork. I kid you not though, just as I found a good sleeping position, the phone calls. In my head I think fuck, have the officers decided to do a exorcist in the middle of the night, and just as I'm about to go to sleep Oswell, fuck me. But it was Peter, his voice was actually shaking, so I took things a bit more serious. Dude, you need to wake up the rest of the guys, he said. Peter, tell me what's going on, is there some Syrian refugee trying to cross, what's up? Just wake them the fuck up anon, and send them all up here. Hangs up. I, also affected by Peter's voice, feel the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I wake up the guys, tell them this is no fucking joke, and that Peter is panicking up into the tower. They half asleep put on their clothes as efficiently as possible, and we all run as fast as we can up the steps to the tower. Upon reaching the up room, we meet Peter, who by all means do not look like himself, even if it's dark inside the room, the moonlight shines through the windows and hit his paper pale face. Olav, which is our leader, but more just a friend with that title, asks him what the fuck is going on, clearly affected by sleep deprivation. I saw something cross the border, it was fucking huge I tell you, not a bear, not a moose, no animal at all, and bigger than a human. Olav kinda looks at him with disbelief, as he says, you sure? I mean, it's 00:30 am, isn't it just the coffee and lack of sleep playing games with you? No, I swear to God it's something down there. I tried to find it with the thermal binoculars, but Cal didn't spot it. 2 of you need to go down there. We all look at each other. During situations like these 2 people go out, and 2 stay in the tower, and to prevent an all-out crisis along the border because of something that we most likely thought were an animal, we didn't call in the information to our main station. Olav, okay, Anon, and Roy, you go out though these coordinates along the borderline and look for traces. Me and Peter will stay in the tower trying to look for what Pete saw. Keep your comms on at all time. Yes, sir. Jeff. We go down, get our gear on, load our rifles, turn off comms and pses, and walk out. It's a steep hill that leads down to a big pool of water on the south side of the base, and we were to walk towards that water along the borderline. It's fucking cold outside, but not too windy, very silent. We walk, no info from the tower pair, and no signs of any crossing anywhere. After about 30 minutes we reach the coordinates given to us, turn on our flashlights and start looking around. What the actual fuck. Webm. Huge prints in the snow, like fucking gigantic holes. No signs of fingers, claws or a print, just holes, like someone shoved a clenched fist in the size of a big log straight down into the snow. The footprints, or whatever the fuck they were clustered together in a relatively big area of maybe 2x3 meters. But the range between each cluster was a whole different story, estimated to be maybe 2.5 to 3 meters between each cluster. Fuck. Now the adrenaline started pumping for real. Me and Roy just looked at each other in disbelief, and Roy said, which I remember very clearly, what in the actual fuck could have made these prints? The comm goes of, both me and Roy jumps like a motherfucker. It's Olav, you guys need to get back up here, now. It sounded like a bad horror movie, and I immediately thought of encountering a fucking huge bear, but a bear wouldn't have made those prints. Why? I replied. I saw something, I don't know what, but it's the same thing as Peter saw. You need to get back to base, it's huge. Okay, scared as fuck is asked, where did you last see it? It was just by the name of the lake/pool of water, maybe 200 meters north. Now, as I said earlier, it's dark outside, but the snow and clear sky with moonlight kinda illuminates the forest. And me and Roy had obviously been walking towards that pool of water the whole time, and at this point we were most likely less than half a k away from it. We started running, but trough deep snow, with heavy gear on our shoulders, it didn't go as fast as we wanted. We halted for a second, got some water from our now almost frozen camel backs, and then it came, a fucking shriek like you wouldn't believe. It was the most non-human shriek I have ever heard. I can't even explain it with words. It was so loud and powerful, the snow from the trees surrounding us started to slip down on our heads. We turned our heads towards where the scream came from, and there it was, tall as the trees it stood amongst, a dark/pale creature with what looked like several long limbs to support its size. In utter shock we stood still, staring towards what looked like a mythological demon. It was maybe 200-300 meters away from us, so it was hard to get a good look at it, but you definitely saw it was there. Also, it was, as I said, tall, not particularly big in width, but tall as the medium tall trees growing around this area. I'm certain it was around 8 to 9 meters tall. Fuck, run Roy, we need to fucking run. And everything went kinda black. I can't really remember anything from our run, only the sensation of blood in my mouth and the focus on every step I took while running, making sure not to fucking fall over. After running for as long as we could, we needed to stop yet again, weapons ready this time. No visual signs of the thing, but yet another shriek, just as terrible as the first one, then thumping, loud, ground-shaking thumping. You know the Jurassic Park movies? When the biggest dinosaurs walk, that kind of experience, it felt like the whole damn ground moved. Instead of waiting to get a visual on this fucker, we decided to start running again, but clearly exhausted, our speed slowly but surely went from decent to plain walking. Constantly thinking of the utter and complete terrifying shit we just had seen, we threw our backpacks away, hoping this would make our retreat at least a bit more effective. It did. We came over the last little hill and could clearly see the tower now. Comms started making noises, afraid the thing might pinpoint our location. I turned the volume down. Olav came onto the comm. I have no fucking idea what that creature is, nothing like I've ever seen, but it's not far behind, it's lurking in the more overgrown areas just beside the trail you are on. I constantly find and lose it. Trough the tower binoculars, you guys just need to get the hell back here. Thump. 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 Thump thump thump. I imagine it started running, and from the sound towards us. We did the same, literally running for our fucking lives. The shrieks became louder, more angry behind us, as it continued to follow us. That's at least what I believe it did. I am sure I can talk for Roy as well when I say it felt like we were about to die from exhaustion. We forced ourselves up the last 50 meters of trail before we reached the front door. Hands were shaking, trying to type in the code on the door lock as quickly as possible. Door opens, WHE both kinda jump in, making sure the door is as locked as can be. Take Olav's and Peter's weapons with ammo, carry it all up into the tower room, and explain what we had seen much more up close to Peter and Olav. They are both pale as ghosts now. Roy can hardly speak. We write it all down as detailed as we can, and deliver it to the main station via mail. Rest of the night everyone is constantly on their toes, watching over the landscape, not saying a word to each other. This was also our last mission before ending our 1-year service to the Norwegian Army. We decided to reschedule our patrol plan, so that everyone walked during the short amount of daytime. The officers didn't believe us, and kinda mocked us, but was glad we didn't call in for support because of some animal. I'm 22 now, so this was 3 years ago. I no longer have any contact with Olav or Peter, I know Roy got PTSS and killed himself last year. This is the best I could find online representing the creature we saw pic related. Imagine it without that black cape, 3 times taller standing up. Something very odd and shocking happened to me. I don't get on this board a lot. I usually lurk on ///k//out//is/ and /r9k/ but I can't post this on any of those. I was thinking of posting on /in/ or /out/ but thought they would direct me here regardless. To summarize, I saw something spectacular that has terrified me and my pals since it happened. The memory has been carved into my brain for the most part, so everything should be accurate. Though I might be paraphrasing our dialogue a little bit. Not enough to change any of what actually happened though. This occurred about a month ago, so I guess I'll just get right into it. Be me. 25-year-old Army vet living in the boonies of wooded South Central Kentucky. Enough forests and woods to spend a whole life walking through. Be turning 26 soon, so in a good mood. Decide to go on a camping trip with some friends on a spur-of-the-moment decision. Call my guys together, 3 other dudes, we'll call them Samuel, Dylan, and Christo. We had a place that we always go camping to, probably not after this. For reference, it's definitely in the Barren County jurisdiction. Get supplies ready, 4 coolers, 2 small tents, a lot of beer and snacks, and 3 blunts. Christo gets in his truck, picks up the other guys, and comes to my place to pick up me and the supplies. Hell yeah. PNG. Put supplies in back with Dylan and sit in the truck. In between Christo making a joke or doing something stupid, we're always quiet while focusing on something. So truck rides, setting up camp, or just working in general always has an awkward silence for us. We're some loud fuckers too. Drive out to the middle of nowhere and walk up the, very long, crude trail us and some other guys made way back when we were seniors in high school. Finally arrive at our spot after probably an hour of walking. After a while, our tents are up and everything else is ready. Christo grabs the 4 coolers, and we all sit on some logs around what will be our firewood when night comes. It's only 4:30 p.m. right now. Grab some beers and start cracking around. Just general fuckery. So Anon, what are you gonna do for your big 26? Says Samuel. Before I get the chance to say anything, Christo pops off, ask Veronica, my GF, she's the one who's deciding. Really funny, oh my sides.jpg. For some reason my friends call me pussy whipped and it's a running joke with them. Came my sarcastic laughing and the rest of them cracking up. Something you should know about Christo. He's a Mexican but a full-blown American-loving Trump-supporting rebel boy. He's a complete Chad, and though he's the biggest party animal you've ever seen, he's a very hard worker. He's 250 and well over 6 feet of pure muscle and jackassery. Christo's almost never serious, but when he is, don't take it lightly. Back to it? Shut up and give me another beer. He obliges. Now hold on a minute, Samuel goes as he pulls out one of the big beautiful blunts. Don't drink any more, why don't we spark up? I thought we were saving those for tonight, I reply. Hell, we'd still have 2 left, he says. I look to Christo and Dylan and they don't have an issue with it. Alright, I guess I put my beer down and Samuel lights it up. Samuel is a little guy. No more than 5 feet 4 inches and 130 pounds, but he's a hell of a heavyweight. Me and Christo hardly ever smoke and this would be Dylan's first time. Samuel lights it up and of course hits it first, and second, and third. After like 4 times Christo takes it from him and hands it to Dylan. Dylan's a bit hesitant. In between Samuel's laughing he says, come on Dylan, don't be pussy, hit it. Your first time's the best. Dylan, you don't have to hit it if you don't want to, Christo says. Nah, I got this. Dylan hits it, then the fucker hits him. Dylan's an average height guy but around 300 pounds and very quiet in public, but a complete jockster in private. Falls over from laughing so hard. Me and Christo keck about it, Samuel's red-faced on the fucking ground. Dylan, the poor bastard, gets up and hits it again. Immediately on the floor again. Christo's in tears now and I'm clenching my sides. I think Samuel's are in orbit. Eventual hands it off to me. I hit it twice and cough a little. Give it to Christo and he takes it better than I did. After passing it around for a bit, it's just a roach, so Samuel supermaned it and we sat around and chilled out. Check my phone and it's already 6. Told my friends and they were as shocked as I was. It had only felt like minutes since we had gotten everything set up at 4:30. Decide to rip into the other 2 blunts. Once we're done with them, get back to chilling out. Christo says he has to piss and walks over to the trees. Guys, Christo says with a weary voice. We look into his general. Guys, he exclaims. We rush over to him to see what's up. The bastard flings around with his dick out and pisses on us. The bastard pissed on us. As a joke, this beaner literally pissed on us. We were pissed on and we were pissed. We tackle him to the ground and wrestled him. It was nothing malicious though. He was laughing the whole time and kept calling himself R. Kelly. We get back over to the campsite and light a fire as it's beginning to get dark. Me, Dylan, and Samuel take our piss-covered shirts off and throw them at Christo. He, being the Einstein that he is, throws them in the fire. Dylan annoyingly states, Christo, you fucking idiot, now the whole place is gonna smell like piss. Here Christo says as he takes off his shirt and throws it into the fire. We all laughed at how dumb Christo was. After fucking around a bit more, once we sober up, we get tired. It was definitely after 11 p.m. once we decided to go into the tents to sleep. Samuel and Christo call one tent, so I'm stuck in the other one with Dylan. Surprisingly enough, it gets hot in a small tent with a fat guy like Dylan. Decide to take my sleeping bag and lay beside one of the logs around our campfire. I remember before dozing off to sleep hearing Christo and Samuel tell some shitty jokes but laughing to them nonetheless. This is when the worst, most terrifying event in my life happened. Of the years I spent in Afghanistan dodging mudslime bullets and watching my friends die by my side, nothing I have ever experienced or Lord willing will experience have or will ever compare to what happened next. I'm literally shaking typing this because of how terrifying redawning upon this awful memory is. I wake up with my head horizontal, sideways, so all I can see is the log beside me. Check my phone, I watch the time switch over from 2:31 to 2:32 a.m. Look up and move my torso upwards with my elbows so my head is facing just above the log. To my surprise, I see a Christo with his mouth gaped open looking up and over at something. Also see Samuel sitting on a log with his mouth open too, looking in the same direction. What's going on? I say, rubbing my eyes. My question was replied to with a cold silence. I annoyingly get up to look in the direction they were looking at. This was what I can only describe as an evil confusion. I felt absolutely shocked whenever I saw what this fucking thing was. The top of this organism was a crude sphere, which I am guessing was its head, though it could have been its torso. Its head was just below the canopy of the forest. On what I'm saying is its head, I couldn't see any orifice. Directly below what I'm loosely calling its head was its legs. Yes, if the top of this creature was its head, then its head was attached to its legs. It had 3 legs, 2 in the front, 1 trailing behind. As it walked, this monster's legs stayed notably and oddly straight, but did bend like a knee would. Its skin is the hardest part to explain. What I can best offer is that its skin was gray and tarp-like. Like plastic, but not like plastic. It's so hard to explain. It was similar to what you would see on an elephant or a seal, I guess. It looked like if you scratched it, it would make a noise like a fucking knife to a blackboard. This abomination was walking not necessarily at us but to our 8 o'clock position. A very deep and loud, what I'm going to call humming. It was fucking loud and deep. It made the ground vibrate. I knew it was coming from this creature, but it was so loud it was almost as if it was coming from the sky. After what I'm liberally calling 2 steps to our 8 o'clock position, I hear a zipper as Dylan opens the tent he was in and steps out. He walks to directly beside me and a still sitting Samuel. His mouth is wide open as well. Given our location and how big this fucking monster was, we've come to call it the Kentucky Colossus. The Colossus was now probably 35 to 40 feet away from us. I still can't tell how much land this thing was clearing with each step. 4 full-grown, well over 20-year-old men just stand/sit in shock and watch as this monster inches, or yards, towards us. We could tell that if it didn't change its walking trajectory it wouldn't touch us or our camping tents or fire. It walks as close as it ever was to us. About 10 feet away from Christo, who it absolutely dwarfed. I can't tell if it noticed us or not. The fucker just walked. For its size, the Colossus' footsteps were a lot quieter than would expect. Especially compared to the humming noise it made. As it takes another step forward, Christo kept staring at it. It was almost as if we couldn't look away from it, not that I was making an effort to look away from it. Me and the boys were dead set on looking at this thing. After more steps away from our direction, Christo turns and looks at us. He started crying. I started crying. I don't know if it was confusion or anxiety or what, but soon Samuel started crying too. Somehow Dylan kept his cool and did as much as he could to console us. Of course he was as petrified as we were, but he didn't cry at all. I remember in between the crying asking what the hell was that thing? I obviously didn't get a coherent response. We sat there huddled around and hugged each other. None of us went back to sleep. After we had settled down, I decided to ask Christo and Samuel, did you two not sleep at all last night? Huh? Why? Samuel responds. I go on, when I had woken up I saw you two awake, when you were *. Oh, Christo let out. No, I had woken up and wanted to smoke, so I grabbed a pack of cigarettes out of Samuel's pants and it woke him up. Oh okay, but when did you two see it? I respond. Christo continues, that's what I was getting to, a swipe. Since I got caught I asked Samuel if I could smoke and if he wanted to join me. He said yes to both. He lit his and I handed me one. I told him I was gonna go check on you. I unzipped the tent flag and went out. I was fidgeting with the cigarette and lighter, and once I got it lit I hit it and looked up. He froze up. That's when I saw it. He was beginning to get a bit choked up. I went to yell out Samuel's name but it came out as a whimper. Regardless, he heard me and asked what. He looks over at Samuel. Samuel says I asked what about 2 more times before I went out of the tent to see Christo standing still, looking off into the distance. I looked up at him and started walking forward. I had my eyes focused on his head and asked what he wanted. By the time I was beside him I looked away in the direction that his head was. Far off in the distance I saw it. How far? asked Dylan. Probably several hundred feet, Samuel replied. I collapsed and hit my ass on the log. He paused for a moment. I went to get you but I couldn't. It was the most petrifying thing I had ever felt. It wasn't like I was paralyzed, I was just choosing not to move. It was weird. Christo put his hand on Samuel's shoulder and continues for him. You woke up eventually, and then once that humming started Dylan woke up. We mostly sat around huddled in silence, constantly looking over our shoulder. We hadn't really spoke too much about it itself while we were huddled with each other by the camp. It was mainly just pep talking, like we gonna fucking make it through the night, or something like if it comes back we're not freezing up. We're gonna grab a flashlight and run down the trail. At around late 4 early 5 the sun began to rise. It was the most beautiful thing we had ever seen. We unassembled the 2 small tents and grabbed the coolers and set off down the trail. A little bit of chit-chat down the trail but mostly silent. For some reason while we were walking down the trail we were afraid once we reached the beginning Christo's truck wouldn't be there. Eventually we get there and lo and behold Christo's truck is there. We throw everything into the truck bed, including Dylan, and set off down the road. But in the truck I think all of us were waiting for someone to bring it up. Finally, after about 15 minutes into the ride, Dylan poked his head in through the rear window and said, "So we all definitely saw the same thing, right?" We were silent for a second, but Christo said, "Y'all saw a giant gray three-legged creature?" Samuel and I said yes. We all heard that loud deep humming noise it made. I asked. The other three said yes. I began to ask, should we tell Ennio dash? No, Christo said in a very matter-of-fact manner. That'd be a good way to get us all locked up in a nut house. Dylan agreed with him and Samuel remained silent. After more silence, Christo continued, "We don't tell anyone. No other friends. No family. No girls or hook ups. This stays between us." Christo looked at us. "We have to be clear on this, okay guys?" We agreed. For the car ride and a bit after, Christo acted really odd. When we got to a gas station, Christo went in to fill up his truck. When he got back out, another Mexican walked up to him and complained about the Confederate flag he had on his truck bed. I didn't know we had white supremacists. You know they hate people like you and me, so why are you waving their flag? Usually Christo would have clowned on him or pushed him and tell him to fuck off. Christo just dead stared at the guy and said, "Go." It was really creepy. He got back in his truck and drove us all to my house. All of us stayed at my place over the weekend and played video or just fucked around. It got brought up a few more times, but the whole time we were at my house there was a really awkward vibe. Every time I think of the Colossus it gives me cold chills. I wanted to ask around to friends and co-workers, but I'm going to stay loyal to that oath we took. From what I know, none of the others guys have brought it up to anyone else. So I'm taking it here. Have any of you here ever seen or heard anything of what I'm talking about? I look up all the details but I get nothing. Any local folklore or just stories that sounds anything like what I witnessed? Or if you've seen what I'm talking about, please tell me your experience or even a friend's experience. Any other forums or places you all could report me to? I'll answer any questions. We just need to find this shit out.